Ladies and gentlemen, channel community, super excited to have everybody joining us for this presentation today. I can't tell you how excited I am about our guest speaker, who's going to help us understand state privacy laws in 2021 and beyond, and what exactly is going on with privacy laws, and not only how are they going to impact you as an individual, as a consumer, but also how they impact your customers. And if you own a large enough organization, this may impact you as well. So we've got some really good content for you today. Super excited about giving you this information because at the end of the day, what it does is it helps you continue your transformation from being a sales partner or a traditional agent into being that trusted advisor for your customers. And believe you me, there are a lot of customers who are going to be wondering what in the heck is going on with state privacy laws in 2021 and beyond. And if you can speak a little bit of this dialogue, it can open a door for you that you may not have been able to open before. Imagine having a dialogue with a company's compliance director or with their privacy group, right? Just to say, how are you handling these laws? Get that ball rolling and then roll it into your total solution for those customers. So as I mentioned before, very excited to have our guest here today. Will Bracker is Corporate Counsel of Privacy for Cox Communications. Will has been with Cox Communications for 18 years. And boy, when we did our trial runs on this, did I learn a lot, guys. And I got to tell you, it woke me up a little bit. And we've got some great stories for you during this presentation today and some fun stuff that you may not know about. Not only does Will do the privacy for us at Cox Communications, which is the parent company to Cox Business. Well, Cox Business is a division thereof. And obviously, Cox Business is the parent company to Rapid Scale. So we're pretty high up the corporate ladder here today. Not only is Will doing this for us as an organization, so he's got his hands on this in 16 states, but he is also teaches this. So he's an adjunct professor at Georgia State University of College of Law. And he teaches privacy and cybersecurity law. So we have got ourselves a great mentor here today, guys. So lean back, get ready, and I think we're going to have a good session. But first, let's talk about some housekeeping. So as a reminder, this webinar session is being recorded as it always is. The deck and the recording will be sent via email as soon as they are available. If you have any questions throughout the presentation today, chat them through the Q&A, and we'll do our best to get them answered. If we can't answer them at the end of the session, we'll certainly put them out with the webinar itself and the deck so you can go back to it. So on the agenda today, guys, what's happening and why do I care? Well, I think I touched on that already. Privacy laws are accelerating, and you care because it's going to impact you as a consumer, but you also care because it's going to impact your customers, and how can you help them navigate these waters is really what it is. Everything you want to know about privacy law, and maybe we're afraid to ask, maybe a bit more than you want to know. How does this change or impact me? So what now? And then we're going to go to questions. Now, this isn't something you normally see next, but before we start, here's our disclaimer, because we are talking law, and we need everybody to understand. I'm not going to read this. I'm just going to let you all take a moment and give it a read through. It'll be in the book when it comes out to you afterwards. So with all of this going on today, we have to protect ourselves and put these disclosures out that we're not teaching you to be a lawyer. We're not asking you to be a lawyer. And certainly that everything we're providing to you is informational. We wouldn't expect you to go out and provide this to your customers as is. With that, allow me to introduce Will. And Will, why don't you take it away from here and let's jump into this and tell these people about what's going on.
Thanks, Mark. So let's go ahead and start with what's changing in the world. That's probably a question you're going to get increasingly from your business partners, your customers. Really what's happening is we're shifting from a treatment in the United States of privacy from a sectoral view or a citizen to government view. So you think about the Fourth Amendment, that sort of thing, that sets the privacy posture between a citizen and their government. Where we've looked at businesses or functions in the past, it's been things like HIPAA, the privacy around healthcare, or Gramm-Leach-Bliley, the privacy around finances and financial services. What's changing now, as technology advances and increasingly more and more private data is coming into the hands of business, is states are looking at more omnibus or comprehensive privacy legislation, something that handles that business to citizen relationship. What's that mean to us? Like, why do we care? Why do our business partners care? Every law grants new rights to citizens puts parallel obligations back on businesses. And in the new emerging world of legislation, as you'll see, the enforcement mechanism for these laws and regulations backed up with some pretty serious penalties. It's also moving very quickly. So I'm going to show you time lapse 2018 to today, how fast these laws are coming out. So 2018, we have one state, 2019, 2020, some more motion. And this year, in the teeth of a global pandemic that's really focused legislatures on the health and welfare of their citizens, you still see comprehensive privacy legislation in a majority of the states of the union. Anything in blue and green is at least being discussed. It's in one house's committee. It's across the chamber. So, one legislature house has completed their work on it and passed it to the other chamber, or passed it from the drafting committee into the hands of their onto the floor in order to be considered. And in the middle of this, we had two new privacy laws passed. So California was joined by Colorado and Virginia. As soon as the weights are removed from the feet of the legislatures and we're back in session, I think it's fair to expect anything in blue and green to at least move forward, if not add a good bit more red to this map. This is very, very fast for legislature, the legislative process. It's also probably important to note that we're seeing much faster action at the state level than we are at the federal level. At the federal level, we've had some introductions, but it's not moving very, very quickly, which is going to lead to a compliance challenge or opportunity, depending on how you want to look at it. We'll touch on that in a bit. So let's dig in a little, and what is an omnibus or a comprehensive privacy law? Typically, what they'll do is say, all right, citizen, this is your, these elements are your personal data, your name, your government identifier, your address. In some cases, things like your device ID for a mobile phone or an email address. And if someone is holding that information, this law is going to grant you a little bushel of rights. You're going to have the right to reach out to those people who hold your data and ask, what do you know about me? And have that returned to you either at the category level, have your financial information, or right down to the element level. I have your bank routing number that you use to pay your bill with using, your check, your debit card. Once you have that knowledge in hand, you often have the right to correct it. Hey, you didn't get that exactly right. Maybe some atomic piece of data like your address. That can extend to things like inferences. Hey, you took my data in and you've evaluated me as someone who's not likely to purchase a certain type of product. That's wrong. I want you to correct that. All of the omnibus laws or comprehensive laws give you the right to limit some uses. Hey, you can have my data and use it to provide me with the service that I've contracted with you for, but I don't want you to use it to market to me, or I don't want you to take my data and share or sell it with another company. I can remove that. If I've granted you that permission, I can remove it. If you just have it, I can block it. And then one of the more difficult rights to operationalize when that data is no longer needed. I'm no longer your customer. That right to be forgotten is essentially a request that can come from a citizen to have you delete the data you have about them. And you can imagine what sort of impact that might have on your business, especially if it's built around maintaining and creating relationships with people. Once they're forgotten, you're basically starting back at ground zero. As I said before, those rights, they flow right into compliance obligations on us. So if a citizen has the right to make a request or a demand, you typically wind up with an obligation to respond. And it's usually not a tremendous amount of time. California, for example, you have an initial 45 days to intake the request, decide how you're going to respond to it, potentially act on it, and then respond to the citizen. If you think about an enterprise really of any size or any age, just finding all of your data can be quite challenging, making that 45 days seem very short to somebody like myself who used to work on the technology side of the house. Like as an old bull DBA, if you came back to me and said, I need to find everything about this individual and get back to them in 45 days and possibly delete it, a little bit of blood would drain out of my face. These laws also essentially start with you're gathering personal data about individuals. You've got an obligation to keep that safe. So when we get into the penalties, losing that data, the consequences for it have become much more severe, raising the risk of loss and putting more focus on cybersecurity and physical security of your operations to prevent that loss. Some of the privacy laws emerging or existing also place an obligation on you to minimize the data you have. So for the stated purposes that you're collecting data, if you gather more data in than you need to perform those purposes, they obligate you to get rid of it. All of them have a transparency or a disclosure obligation, which forces you to go out and take a public stance and say, this is what I'm gathering. These are the reasons that I'm gathering the data. Some of them include, and this is how long I'm going to hold on to it. And keep in mind, think back to that map. What we're talking about is primarily state law, which means the obligations here are going to vary slightly from state to state, which forces multi-state businesses to make a tough choice, either to set up parallel compliance programs with increased operational cost for running them in parallel, or to adopt a single compliance program that takes the most restrictive approach. So where you might have a state that's very, very tight on what data they allow you to collect and use, where the others may be more open. If you take that tight definition, what that will do is make it easier for you to comply and much harder on people like your analytics and your insight teams. So it's not an easy question to answer. And then when things do go south, the penalties around violating these new laws are very, very steep. So I've got a couple of them on the screen in front of you, but I wanted to frame it up a little more, something that's maybe a little more relatable. So not too long ago, Equifax lost a considerable amount of data in a breach. If that had happened today under the California law, that would have resulted in a potential state exposure for Equifax just in California of more than $97 billion. The class action consumer exposure would have been north of 22 billion of that $97 billion. And just that exposure level for California is about 4.5 times the total payments that California has received from the Tobacco Master Settlement Agreement over the period of 1998 to 2019. There are a lot of teeth in these laws, and they're really focusing the attention of legal departments, compliance departments, and operational groups, because if something does go wrong, there's a great big canyon of liability waiting for you there. Where are you going to see change in your operations and in your negotiations or your conversations with your partners? It's going to start in the negotiation phase. So given the amount of energy, work, and potential exposure here, it's going to start as a qualifying question in any sales situation or acquisition conversation. Hey, are your solutions compliant with the state obligations that I'm required to comply with? And if you can't get past that question, that may end the conversation. When you move to the contracting stage, in addition to everything else that goes into a contract, contracts are where risk gets shifted and indemnifications happen. Where they can be transferred, you will see a lot of energy around it, trying to push it in one direction or another. I'd also point out that there's some risks that simply can't be shifted in contract. So if you are the business that loses data and it gets out there in the clear, you typically can neither shift nor insure against that reputational harm. And it's coming out there. There's a lot of attention on this. Finally, the first two are going to go into your operations. So you're going to have to operationalize the ability to comply with these laws. You're also going to have to operationalize the ability to trace the fact that you have complied. So in case a regulator or a litigant rolls up to your door and says, show me, you've got the ability to easily demonstrate that you are compliant with the law. That will go back into negotiations and contracting. Can your solutions deliver what I'm looking for? So getting short on time, let me give you 3 quick practical next steps boiled into what should you look at. Train before the race, phone a friend, and fasten your seatbelt. Train before the race is basically start now. The California CCPA is active, but the other laws that just got passed, and certainly the ones that haven't passed yet, the 2 that have passed go live January 1, 2023. The other states are coming. You've got a little bit of time to get going down the road. So now's the time to go look at things like, do I know where my data is? Is my operation, are my operations ready to absorb the load? It's the kind of thing you can, to Mark's example, sit down with a compliance officer or sit down with an operations team and say, hey, look, this is coming. Are you ready to respond to it? Is that something I can help you with? Basically, raise the question, have a plan. Phone a friend. This is complicated stuff. I've spent probably the last 10, 12 years of my life dealing with it. I learn something new every day. To the extent that this impacts you or it touches your life, I would find trusted counsel, help, guidance, and get up to speed. Find an expert and leverage them. And then fasten your seatbelt. We're far from done on this. We've got 50 states, only 3 have actually made it past the end gate. There's a lot of change coming. So, build for it, anticipate for it. In change, there's opportunity. Just get ready for it. And let me go ahead and close at this mark and take any questions.
Yeah, so Will, prior to taking a question or two, I look at this and I say to myself, we saw compliancy really start heating up in the healthcare industry about 8 years ago, maybe 9 years ago. And it took a few years to get to the place where we're at today with HIPAA and everything else that's going on. You say fasten your seatbelts, and I don't remember a time when, at least in my lifetime, we backed off as a country of once we get this momentum going with us, right? We normally don't see the pendulum swing back. At least it doesn't swing back to a very far place behind to where we're at. When I look at all of this that's going on, it reminds me of the big financial issues we had about 2 decades ago, and how citizens were being taken advantage of, right? I won't name names, but people had their entire savings and their 401ks wiped out. And the state and the government stepped up to protect them, right? And really what we're talking about is doing the same thing here, right? At the end of the day, the states are coming in and federal government's coming in and saying, look, Mr. Business Owner, operational business owner, you have all this information and it's very, very critical to your end user consumers. And if you're not going to protect it to the level that we need you to protect it to, we're not going to use a carrot, we're going to use a stick to get you to do it. Is that a fair assessment of what we're going through now?
Yeah, the only nuance I put on it is if you're going to go back to that time, we're at the very beginning of it, where states were moving more quickly than the federal government to respond. And I think what you're likely to see is a period of time where you have a lot of fractionated state law that will probably ultimately come into a federal scheme similar to the way we wound up with GLBA, but it's going to take time. And
right.
That's, depending on who you talk to, somewhere in the 3 to 10 year range. And I'm not going to opine on it.
Right. No, I'm with you on that. Summer, I know when we originally did this recording, we had some technical difficulties, but we had some good questions. So can you go ahead and let's ask Will a couple of those questions before we close it out?
Yep. I will get started with this one. So I know the purpose of today's call is to alert us as trusted advisors, but how about our clients? How can we specifically help them?
That's a great question. So the way I'd look at it is, when you're going in to talk to your clients, this is going to be something that falls into the either I haven't thought about it yet, and you can make them aware of it. That's a benefit right there. It's kind of like headlights on a car. This is coming, let's get ready for it. For folks that have just started looking at this, they're going to be wondering, what can I do? Starting with probably, does it apply to me? And that's coach them to go, talk to their counsel, go look at the individual states they're in and the laws that apply, determine if this even is something you've got to worry about. And then only after those two dominoes fall, if it does apply to you, can you start helping them solution through what's the best way to get to where I can be compliant, prove I'm compliant, and then notify the folks who depend on me and my products of what I'm doing to meet the obligations that fall under the laws, and let the citizens exercise their rights.
Great answer. Summer?
Yeah. The next one that had come in was, do these laws apply to only doing business with residents of the state or also something else?
Typically, yes. So state law ends at the borders of the state itself, but if you're targeting your product or services to citizens in that state from beyond the borders, typically states can reach back, full faith and credit, and bring you into their state courts. Also, if you're a multi-state enterprise, even if it's just, hey, I drive over the border from Georgia to South Carolina, Georgia to Florida. Florida is one of the ones that's right on the cusp of passing a law. You really need to look at, where are the feet of my company and what am I going to have to comply with? We don't have a overarching federal law that applies coast to coast like this. A couple have been introduced. We probably will eventually have one. And at that point, I'll answer that question differently.
There you go.
All right, and I have two more for you, and I think this one kind of ties into what you were talking about. Which one would take precedent for a company, the state law or the federal law?
So that's actually a great but nuanced question. So the simple answer is federal law typically trumps state law, but there's one bill in the House and one bill in the Senate right now. The question is that of preclusion. So One, I think, is the Senate bill that essentially says this is the law of the land and no other law enters in. Basically, it sweeps away state privacy law. The House bill, if I'm remembering correctly, says this is the floor. This is the minimum available, but states can go beyond. And if you look at probably a better analogy is the emissions control laws, the CAFE laws, they're floors. So you see each state can set a slightly different emissions law. And California's, for example, is much more stringent than the rest of the country. So if you buy a car in Georgia and ship it to California, it typically does not meet their emission standards. And that's federal law where it got started. So it's a complicated, nuanced question that goes back to my phone a friend.
There you go.
You may need a hand there.
All right. And I know we talked about this one yesterday, but I still think it would be good to just readdress and then we can wrap up. Does this affect all of my customers regardless of their size?
Yeah, it might not, and actually likely it does not. So each of these laws has a section that tells you who it applies to. And if we go to California, there's basically 3 criteria. You either sell or share a certain proportion of consumer data with other partners. You're of a certain size, your market capitalization goes beyond a certain point. Or you transact with the data of X number of citizens in the course of a year. The result of that can be a little weird. So if you're a very small, like let's say you're a sole practitioner restaurant, but you take 300 credit card transactions a day, every day of the year, you're likely subject by that definition to the CCPA, even though the data that people are exchanging with you is probably not paramount in their minds for losing. Conversely, if you're a small financial services firm and you know everything about all of your customers, but you don't sell that data, you don't transact with more than a handful of high net worth individuals, and you don't have that sky high market capitalization, you're probably not subject to this law. Although if you went to any of your customers and asked, should you be, they might say yes, because you have all their data. So it's not an easy answer to your question, Summer, but it's something you need to look at on a state by state basis.
Fantastic. Well, hey, want to say thank you again for doing this presentation today. A lot of great information. Sales partners, trusted advisors. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this presentation. I know we don't see things on law and go like this, woohoo, let's go. This is gonna be a party. We're gonna have a great time. But the reality of this is we've faced this already at rapid scale. We faced this when we were a really young company back in 2000. And I'm sorry, 2000, back in 2012, 2013, when we started to hear this thing called HIPAA, and it was starting to gain relevance, and knowing that it was coming at us at rapid scale, we took it head on. We said there's no way we're going to see compliancy and regulatory control drop. We're only going to see it increase. So we decided we wanted to become a company that understands this. We're taking the same position here. We want to become a company that understands this and that can help you help your customers. So we're certainly not there yet. As Will very, very nicely pointed out, this stuff doesn't even really start to hit until 2023. So we do have some time, and that means we have time together. But we'll keep putting out information like this if you guys find it valuable. And again, any place we can have another bullet for our gun, any place we can have another point of entry to talk to a customer, any place we can bring something to the customer's attention that they may not be looking at it yet, that gains credibility and trust in you as that trusted advisor with that client. So we really hope you guys enjoyed this today. Always and forever grateful to Summer and Nikki for helping us put this together and the logistics and running the back end. Thank you very much, marketing department. We will see you all in a month for our next webinar series. And I promise you it will be just as informational and hopefully give you some tools to go out there and be successful. Have a great afternoon and have a great rest of your month. Thanks for coming.